The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. My name is Jen Saunders. I'm a Senior Program Officer with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. I want to welcome you to our fourth webinar in a series designed for providers in California who operate or are interested in operating a rapid rehousing program. We have had 3 prior webinars. The first was on May 13th and focused on the recently released rapid rehousing performance benchmarks and program standards. The second webinar was on May 25th and focused on the first core component of rapid rehousing, which is housing identification. The third webinar was held on June 9th, discussed the second core component, which is rent and move-in assistance. And you can listen to these webinars by visiting the Alliance's website, endhomelessness.org. We will also be sending out the link to the audio as well as the slides following this webinar. So today's webinar will focus primarily on the third core component of rapid rehousing, which is case management and services. Today, Cynthia Degendra of the National Alliance to End Homelessness will be presenting along with 2 excellent California providers. So as I mentioned, this is the final webinar in our series on rapid rehousing. Just some brief logistics for the webinar. It will last about 1 hour. All the lines will be on mute, and we will have a question and answer period following the presentation. So please feel free to send us questions at any time in the question box in your webinar. And again, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted. And with that, I will turn it over to Cynthia.
Good morning, California. Today we will be giving you an overview of rapid rehousing case management and services, as Jen mentioned. We'll be talking about program strategies for case management services for ESG and HSP grantees, and generally any rapid rehousing provider, as these strategies really should be used across all rapid rehousing providers. And also we will be taking questions. I'm going to provide an overview of the goals and basic activities of rapid rehousing case management and services, and briefly highlight some of the principles and case management standards from the rapid rehousing standards that we recently published. Our 2 very experienced speakers will be illustrating just how those standards work on the ground in highly effective programs. So if you've been watching the series or have been operating rapid rehousing for some time, you're probably quite familiar with the 3 core components of rapid rehousing. The 3 core components are housing identification, rent and move-in assistance, and case management and services. And so to put it more simply, rapid rehousing programs help participants find housing fast, pay for housing, and stay in housing. So today we're going to focus on this 3rd core component of rapid rehousing, case management and services. The goals of rapid rehousing case management is to help participants obtain and move into permanent housing, to support participants to stabilize in that housing, and to connect them to community and mainstream services and supports if needed. So rapid rehousing is a short-term crisis intervention, and the intent of rapid rehousing case management, therefore, is not to build a long-term services relationship, but instead to really assist a household in accessing and stabilizing in a housing unit. Because of that, case management focuses on navigating barriers to tenancy and helping participants to build a support system, which we're going to talk a lot more about today. Rapid rehousing case management really requires a pretty major shift from how we might traditionally think about case management, because it is time limited and it is highly focused on one thing: housing. Because this is a short-term crisis intervention, as I mentioned, and it's meant to quickly end someone's homelessness, participants only work with the program for a short amount of time. So case managers have to be highly focused on activities related to housing, housing retention, and connecting people to supports outside the program so that they can stabilize in that housing once the program ends. I know for people who have been case managers in other types of programs, this might really kind of represent a shift for how you're thinking about your case management activities. And now we'll kind of give you a brief overview of the rapid rehousing case management and standards. At the end of this webinar, there will be a link to show you how to get to that standards document. But I really encourage you to read the actual program standards, especially in the case management section, as they're much more detailed in what we can cover just in this webinar. But we will give you some highlights. Rapid rehousing case management really falls into three kinds of stages. And so if we think about the three stages, they are obtaining and moving into permanent housing, supporting the household to stabilize in that housing, and closing the case. Case managers' housing-focused activities fall into two major buckets: assisting participants in obtaining housing and stabilizing in that housing. So case managers are first exploring and helping people overcome their barriers to housing. This doesn't mean, however, that that case managers are waiting for people to be housing ready. Rapid rehousing is built on a housing-first philosophy that recognizes that everyone is housing ready. Everyone is ready to be housed despite their barriers, and the case manager is focused on working through these barriers with the client when obtaining housing and when stabilizing in that housing. And there are two major types of housing barriers. There's barriers to obtaining housing and barriers to maintaining housing. When we talk about barriers to obtaining housing, we're really talking about tenant screening barriers. What are the things a landlord is really going to look at when deciding to rent to a tenant? What are the things they might be screened out for? Rapid rehousing programs have a lot of tools to figure out how to work with landlords to sort of work through these tenant screening barriers. Things like evictions, criminal history, rental history, lack of income or unsteady income, household size, documents, sometimes language barriers. So these are the types of things that sometimes can work to screen people out of housing. Case managers and program staff are really working to kind of work through those to get the household to obtain housing. And then barriers to maintaining housing or stabilizing in housing are really things that interfere with a person's ability to comply with the lease. So post-housing placement, case managers are really helping participants maintain and comply with their lease, which is why going over the lease and understanding what's in that lease is incredibly important when providing case management. So here are some basic principles to use when delivering effective rapid rehousing case management. Rapid rehousing case management should really be client-driven and voluntary. And what that really means is the client is developing and owning the goals in the case plan. And the case manager is helping to develop and refine these goals, but it's really the client or the household's goals that they are moving forward. And those goals are relevant and short-term and things that the household can really achieve and are accountable for because they have developed those goals. The case management really should be sort of flexible in intensity. So that means that you're only offering essential assistance until or unless the participant demonstrates that need or requests more additional help. So not everyone is going to need the same amount of case management. In other words, some people are going to need just a few meetings a month. Some people are going to need meetings every day. Some people are going to need less as time goes on. And some people might need more as time goes on. And the case manager really uses a lot of discretion to figure out how to individualize their case management so it really suits the household's needs. Case management should really use a strengths-based approach to empower clients. This means that we're really focusing on the household's strengths rather than their deficits when thinking about goals and how to move them through achieving those goals. And again, rapid rehousing case management really should reflect the short-term nature of the assistance that rapid rehousing is providing. So case managers are really spending a lot of their time setting up a support network, linkages for the household to rely on once the short-term assistance is ended, so that the household can smoothly transition to other types of support. You don't have a lot of time with the folks that you're serving, so we're really trying to set them up so that they are able to stabilize and transition smoothly off of assistance. Here are some standards that are related to program staffing and their job descriptions. So as I mentioned before, case managers' job descriptions, case managers really are focused on housing. So case manager job descriptions should really direct case managers to focus on housing and to use the strength-based practices that I just mentioned. If your job descriptions are outdated or very generally about case management, you may want to rewrite them to focus on these particular housing-focused activities. Programs have told us that when they rewrite their job descriptions and either sort of review them with staff that have been in the position for a long time or recruit new staff, that this really kind of elicits the right kinds of activities from the case manager and kind of helps the case manager focus on what rapid rehousing case management really is. Secondly, in programs that have specialized staff that conduct housing location, case managers work closely with the housing locator staff to match the client to an appropriate unit as quickly as possible. I'm going to talk more about staffing on the next slide. So ideally, your rapid rehousing program has separated out the housing identification function and the case management function. We talked a lot about this in our webinar on housing identification. We know it's very challenging to wear both of these hats, as I know many of you listening to this webinar already do. So if you have the ability to restructure or hire a housing locator or housing specialist who really understands those activities to focus on identifying housing for your participants, that would be the staffing design we would most recommend, as that's what really effective programs say works the best. Case managers then could focus on providing support during and after housing placement, can link clients to mainstream and community resources for stabilization, and not sort of have to worry about the identifying housing part. And it sort of allows case managers to really help clients identify strengths in retaining housing and focusing on housing stability. If you're unable to have a housing specialist, or you don't have this kind of staffing right now, then you're really juggling both sets of duties, and you should sort of try to figure out how to have a manageable size caseload so that you can do both sets of duties as effectively as possible. Next slide, please. Here are some standards related to case planning. Case plans should be focused on addressing barriers to housing retention, as we talked about. Case plans should really summarize the steps both the case manager and the participant are going to take to achieve the participant's immediate and short-term goals. And that focus on short-term goals is really key. As we talked about in previous webinars, households that are experiencing homelessness are experiencing an intense amount of crisis, and coming up with long-term goals can kind of be overwhelming and be difficult to achieve. So case plans should really focus on shorter-term and achievable goals that the household feels that they can actually achieve. And those case plans should adjust as the household either needs to, you can make longer-term goals as the household starts to stabilize, or you might find that the case plan just isn't quite working, and that means that the goals probably need to change. The case manager should update the plan regularly because of the changes that the household might be experiencing. And again, intensity of case management should increase if needed. So we don't want to throw everything we have at a household if they don't necessarily need that, but we want to be able to flex up if needed. Case management should also be home-based, which one of our presenters, Juan, today will really address more closely. And because our case managers, again, have a relatively short time with participants, case managers are focused most of their time helping participants build a support network outside of the program, and connecting the community resources that they have at their fingertips and service options to really help the household stabilize beyond the program's duration. Here is a community support network map that some providers have used and told us is really helpful to help come up with a range of connections that households can rely on to build stability. I think that if you are a case manager, and I have experienced this myself when I was a case manager, it's just tough to not want to fix everything ourselves and kind of take on a lot of these roles. But to help our clients really remain stable in a short amount of time, we have to be sort of creative in helping them connect to the community in as many ways as we can, and connect them to resources that are going to help them remain stable when and if another crisis occurs, especially if they're moving into a new neighborhood, or they don't necessarily have the same supports that they had because they've moved. So we really want to think about all the different kinds of things that a community, a person might need in their community to really support and stabilize. And rapid rehousing kind of acknowledges, again, that case managers just really can't be everything to everyone, and that helping people know where to go can actually prevent homelessness in the future. And finally, just some things to remember. We can't tell who will and won't be successful, or really predict client resiliency. Meaning, although we may think we can predict who might be successful, especially if we've been doing this for a long time, we're kind of surprised a lot of the time by how resilient a household can be, and even under the most difficult of circumstances. So though we may sometimes be concerned a household may not be able to be on their feet in just a few months, or I hear this a lot, that we are setting people up to fail, we really have to shift that thinking to the belief that rapid rehousing is setting people up to be in the best position possible to stabilize in housing, so that we and the households receiving assistance are empowered as much as possible to succeed. So setting people up in the best position to succeed in housing is kind of what we really want to focus our thinking on. So next, we are very fortunate to have Juan Gould from Abode Services to share his staff's experience with rapid rehousing case management in a very challenging housing market.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Juan Gould. I'm the Housing Program Manager at Abode Services. I'm going to be talking with you today about our rapid rehousing program that we run out of our Alameda County office. Abode Services has works in several different counties throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, but the ones that I manage specifically are in the East Bay area, which includes Oakland all the way south to Fremont area. So as a program introduction, we have several different funding sources within our one rapid rehousing program, just to kind of set the stage for you. We have ESG funding, we utilize home funds, our boomerang funds, and private donors. Next slide. If we can go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. I also manage several other similar programs because we have one team that utilizes the same program model, and those programs include our linkages program as well as our Alameda County CalWorks HSP program. Lynn will be speaking with you a little bit later about our Santa Clara County HSP program, so I'm not going to necessarily go into that today. However, we utilize the same program model here in Alameda County. And for our staffing, I know that they spoke earlier about the different models to have staffing, but the ones that I particularly have are housing service coordinators, which do wear both hats. So they do have a lower caseload so that they're able to concentrate on the housing search and placement as well as the case management aspects of the program. Next slide. So in our program we do regular home visits, and the home visits can be in the home, in the field, or in the office. We try to meet with, as a regular standard, we try to meet with families at least once a month, touch base with them. But quite often it can be more often depending on their goals, what they're going through, what they're working on at the time. But communication is critical, so we want to at least have communication usually in the home once a month, but it can be in the field, it can be at a restaurant or something like that, Starbucks or something, or depending on what it is, we can have them come into the office to meet with us, depending on transportation and their availability. We also do reassessments every 3 months. So the way we break our program down is it's typically about a 12-month program, just as a standard. It can be less, it can be a little bit more, depending on the individual household and their needs. But we typically will do a reassessment at the 3-month point. We'll reassess their housing stability plan, their goals that they've set, as well as their budget, and go over their income. And at that point, they can receive a rental subsidy decrease at that point, but that's when we'll look at an adjustment for that. And our case management services include referrals, resources, financial assistance, job search, child care, education, basic life skills development, transportation, and anything that can help them with self-sufficiency. At the end of the program, we want to try to assess and address and see if we can provide some resources around that so that they'll be self-sufficient at the end of the program when they exit with us. The goal of the rapid rehousing case management is to help participants obtain and move into permanent housing, stabilize in housing, and get connected to services and supports as needed. Not only to get those services, but keep in mind it's really important to let them know where they can access services and needs as we move through the program as well. Because once they exit the program, there still may be services that they need. There may be something that's not addressed during their time in the program. However, after the fact, they may have a need, whether it's employment, education, something to further a long-term goal. So helping them understand that those services can be out there to them and how to access them in the community is really important as well. So how do we help our families get through our rapid rehousing program? So similar to what was mentioned before, we utilize a strength-based approach. We make sure when we're working with families that we're working on their strengths. A good example of that is it's very important for families that may have had housing challenges in the past to develop a good rapport with their landlords in their new home that they've moved into. Even if that's not their long-term goals to stay there, while they're in the program and receiving the subsidy, it's important that they establish some type of good reputation so that they can rely on that on an application to move into the place that they eventually want to be in. So if one of their strengths is interacting with the landlord and they can present very well and they can advocate for themselves well, respectfully and professionally, then to encourage them to do that, to establish a good rapport with their landlord, I think is really critical. However, if that's really not their strong point, if they're very adversarial, if they think it's him against me, and that sort of thing, maybe you can emphasize they can communicate in writing or something like that. So where if they're good at that, then they can get what they need addressed, still develop rapport, but do it in a different way that maybe won't detract from what they're trying to accomplish. It's important that as you're doing case management with your families that it's individualized and that it's flexible. You have a basic program structure, but all families are different. So you really have to take a look at what their individual needs are, what their individual goals are, so that you can tailor their goals to them, and also that it's flexible, because if your program's a year to 2 years, things change. That seems like a very short time for a subsidy, and it is. However, even in a couple months, things can change very quickly. So it's important that you're not rigid on that as you move forward and they move through the program, that you remain flexible with the family as their goals change or their situations change. It should be client-driven. It's their lease, so it's very important that as you're working with them, that you're working with them in the interest of what they want to accomplish with the place that they're living. It's their job that they're trying to get, that they, you really pay attention to what they want to do, what their strengths are, how they want to search, and the types of work history that they want to create for themselves. It's their credit and their goals, so it's important that you realize that you're working with these families and providing a great service to them, but the best service in case management you could provide is really tailored to what their specific needs and wants are, not the same one as some of the other people on your caseload. Just because it worked for another family doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work best for that family. Even though it may work, it may not work best. So it's really important to pay attention to that. And work with them to help navigate through the program. It's very important that you're not coming in and dictating, well, this is the way the program works, and we're going to increase your rent, or we're going to move you in here, and you're going to move you there. The program will continue to work. Life is going to continue to happen. But when you show up at their door and when you're doing case management with them, when you're working with the families, it's important that you're letting them know that I'm here to help you navigate not only your goals that you set for yourself that I've helped you do, but also the life that happens, the process of the program, whether it's rent increases or whatever, that's going to happen, but I'm here to help you with that. So how are we going to be able to tackle that? I'm going to provide you resources to help you tackle that, and I'm going to provide some perspective and ideas and things like that to help you keep focus on what you said that your goals were to be in the program. So I think that's very important. And it's critical to build your resource database. Each family is individual, and they may come up with something that you hadn't heard before, and your thought may be, well, you can go to the library and look that up, that sort of thing. But it's very important that as you do research for families and provide them those resources, here's some numbers you can call to get that resource, that you keep that in mind and call them yourself and see what else they offer, and really have, a wide range of resources in your toolbox, so that as a different family, maybe 6 months later, runs into something similar, you have, some resources there and have some feedback on how that worked for another family, or maybe have a go-to person at that place. So, make sure that you're storing those up as you go through and continue this work. so that you can provide the most services as possible to all your families. And keep in mind, this is a short-term intervention, as was mentioned before. So you need to try to provide as many resources and referrals as possible and let the families know how to access them. Give them the tools that they need and have them realize that these tools aren't just for when you're in this program. These are the tools out in the community, and you have access to them even as you exit this program, and this is how you would access them. And once you teach them that, it's the whole teach them how to fish, kind of philosophy, and they'll be able to help themselves as they move long-term, because life continues to happen. People continue to have housing barriers and challenges even after the program, even when successfully housed. With raising kids and families and jobs come and go and things like that, there's several different barriers that they may have to address, and provide them with all the resources possible so they could find them for themselves later on in life. So flexible support is critical in the rapid rehousing model. Now, initially I say try to stick to the basic program structure, using the basic rapid rehousing philosophies in the interest of consistency for your program. We all receive funding so that we provide certain type of services to the community, and if we do that and document it, we can continue to provide those services. So it's important that there's a certain level of consistency across the way that you provide that. Like I said, all families are different. Their needs are different. What brought them to this point in their life and their histories may be different. However, utilize the philosophy so that you're making the same types of decisions for families, especially when it comes to whether or not to increase the rent. They may be scheduled for a rent increase and a lower subsidy amount at a certain point. You shouldn't make that decision just based on the fact, well, it's this many months and that's why we're raising the rent. It also shouldn't be whether or not they, were nasty to you, or whether or not they have participated in the program necessarily in a certain way that's easier for you, or anything like that. It really should be based on being flexible about the individual family. One of the key components, I think, for that flexible type of support is effort and communication. As long as a participant is making an effort towards accomplishing their goals, you may have sat with them, 3 months before and laid out a great plan and goals that they want to accomplish for themselves and an action plan to achieve them. Their idea of how to get to that point may be very different from your own, or very different from another family that has gone through the program. So they may be making some effort, and it may not necessarily be a straight line to the goal they're trying to accomplish. But communicating with them that they're making that effort, having regular meetings with them, that they're letting you know, they're going to have challenges. Sometimes a family will get a job and they're making money and things are moving, and then they get laid off, or they lose a job for whatever reason, or this, that, or the other. So there are setbacks at times, but the effort needs to be there. They need to be pounding the pavement. They need to be submitting applications. They need to continue to make the effort and communicating that with you. They can't constantly miss meetings and not call you back and things like that. Ask for support and then they don't respond back to them. So one of the key two of the key things I think is in remaining flexible with the support that we give is that there's some sort of effort on their part, and that they're communicating with you what those are and what their needs are. And pretty much that's what we utilize, effort and communication, for granting an extension in the rent increase, or an extension even in the program, the length of the program, or even lowering the rent on occasion and things like that. It really doesn't have to do with necessarily the accomplishment of the goals, just the efforts towards it, because that's all a learning process as well. Next slide. I'm gonna jump a little bit to something else that I discussed previously in setting up what my presentation would be about, and that is case manager safety in the field. We're all tasked with working with families and taking them through the program. but once we get placement, quite often our case managers are out in the field and driving around kind of all over the place. And some neighborhoods they may be very familiar with, and some they may not. So it's critical that we're constantly reminded not to get too relaxed with how we're providing our services, and make sure that our case managers are being safe, that are maintaining safe practices when they're out in the field, so that they can continue to service families and be in this business for a long time, and not get burnt out and things like that by not being safe when they're out there and having any incidents happen, God forbid. So just some key things for safety in the field that I want to go over are to make sure someone knows where you're going and what time you'll be there. Different agencies have different, check-in and check-outs from the office. In our program, we all have calendars. We utilize the Google Calendar that your supervisor can see or your coworkers can all see where you're at. I ask my case managers to put the address where they're going on there. If it's a place they've never been to before, to let me know via text if they're going over there when they're back in their car and leaving the property. So it's critical for someone to know exactly where you're at all times in case there's an issue. That's very important. To be prepared. Be prepared in advance. It'll save you time. It'll make you more aware. It'll make you less flustered and more aware of your surroundings when you're there. So have all your documents in order, ready to go, paper clips on them in the right order that you're going to present them to the client. Pre-fill in the documents, at any cases that means less time with your head down and filling stuff out, and while the client's just sitting there. Bring a clipboard. Quite often you're sitting on the you want to sit on the kitchen table, but it's full and there's kids doing homework, so you sit on a couch, and if you're filling paperwork out, it's important that you have some that you could write on. So know the area. View the area online. If it's an area you haven't been to before, look it up on Google Maps. It's very easy these days. Become familiar with it. Go to satellite view and actually look at where a good parking area would be if you've never been to the property. You can even go to Street View and look around and say, okay, I probably won't park there because there's no real access back to the road, or there's a lot of traffic, or there's red curbs and things like that. Just seeing the area in advance will leave you calmer, more prepared when you get there, and quite often will lead to a safer environment for you. Put items away in your car in advance. I do tell my staff, if you're on the freeway and you're going to multiple homes in one day, as soon as you exit, or as soon as you're down the street from your destination, pull over to a gas station or a 7-Eleven and put your computer in the trunk. Put your purse in the trunk. Just take out the items that you're going to take with you. Take out your clipboard or your notepad and have that in the car with you, so you could just get right out of your car and not have to pull things out or put things away while you're sitting there just pulling up to a property, because then your focus is inside your car and not on your surroundings. So it's important to be prepared as you're pulling up to properties. To be very aware of your surroundings and the exterior of the buildings. You may have a great relationship with the family and may have been to the property before, but you may pull up and there could be something else going on. There could have been a fight outside the unit, or there could be a bunch of people hanging out there that you're not kind of familiar with. So just be really aware of your surroundings and what's going on. Also, utilize your smartphone. Most people do have a smartphone. At our agency, we do utilize the iPhone for all of our case managers. So it's critical that they're trained and understand how to utilize the map feature, so they know exactly where to get at all times, and it directs them there, so they're not worried about where they're going. That you can access the camera quickly or recorder quickly. So if you have a confrontation of some sort, or you are getting out of your car or going back to your car and there's a bunch of people around it, you can very quickly make it look like you're checking in text. You turn your camera on and you just hold your phone in your hand, not up like you're holding a movie camera or anything, but just hold it in your hand, and if somebody approaches you and says something, all of that's recorded. You can get back in your car and completely erase it and nothing happening, great. But if something does happen, you have it documented, and and it could lead to a safer environment for you. Be aware of who is in the unit as you're coming to the client's home. Ask them when you come in, is anybody else home? So you don't get any surprises about who may be in a back room or any noises you hear, and don't sit with your back to the hallway where some people could be coming down from them that you're not familiar with. So just be aware and let them know what your expectations are for that meeting. I would like to meet with you by myself. I would like to meet with you by yourself. Are you going to have anyone else there? Ask them in advance. I think that's very important to know who's there. And if somebody's there sitting in the living room, as you start your meeting, ask them if it's okay to discuss their housing situation and income and goals and things like that in front of the people that are sitting there. They may not be a planned guest or something like that. So if for some reason you get the impression that they don't really want to, talk about all that stuff, you might have to reschedule. But give them an opportunity to tell you that. Be aware of the time that you're visiting. Different times of year, it gets dark at different times. So once we get into the fall, it's going to get dark at 5 o'clock, 5:30. Don't really set 4:30 appointments, and then you may set a 4 o'clock appointment. The client says, I'm running a little late, so that appointment's not going to start till 4:30. You're going to walk out of that apartment at 5:30. It's going to be dark already. So be aware of that. If that's what you're going to do, check on the lighting in the area or just reschedule. Follow your instinct. If you have a bad gut feeling about something, reschedule, schedule it with your supervisor or another partner to go with you just to be safe. Better safe than sorry. And always project calmness and respect. If discussions get elevated or anything like that, or somebody else, in the home is upset about, the way the program's going, or an exit letter they got, or a rent increase or something, always try to just stay calm and be respectful to them no matter what they're saying to you. Then you can go back and say, you know what, I really would like you to be respectful to me. I'm trying to be as respectful as possible to you. Even though you don't like what I'm saying, I am trying to be respectful to you. So quite often that can help de-escalate situations and make sure that you get out of there safe and sound. And that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to introduce my partner who runs another program. I'll let her introduce herself. Lynn, take it away.
Thanks, Juan. So my name is Lynn Morrison, and I'm Director of Housing Programs in Santa Clara County. And one of the programs that I'm responsible for is our CalWorks Housing Support Program. So I'm just going to go over, I think Juan did a great job of the specifics on case management and stuff like that. I'm going to go over our program and more the process as we move through the program. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the program is about, and then go through the process of case management, starting with the beginning of the client engagement, what we do during pre-housing before they're in the housing, and then also the type of case management after they move into housing, and then just kind of some general components of case management that we follow. Next. So in our HSP program, the eligible families are receiving CalWorks benefits, and they are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And I think as we've kind of been woven through all of it, it's important to remember that this is a housing program. And so all of the services that we're looking at, whether they're from us or social services, are really provided to support finding and maintaining housing. So the staffing of the housing support program is essentially employment counselors, service coordinators, and housing specialists. And the employment counselors are social services employees, and then Abode provides service coordinators and housing specialists. And I think one of the things that works really well with our program is that all of the staff are located in one building. So we are co-located with the Employment Connection Center, which is a social services agency program, in their building, which means that that I think it's much easier to coordinate services. We can, just go across the building and connect with people, and also the families are coming into there for services for employment or for abode services. So it kind of ties everything together. There's also other service providers that are located in that building. So again, it provides for a much more seamless services and helps everybody to work together. So the employment services that are available have to do with job skills training, resume writing, job placement. There is supervised job search, job club, and the families can access all of those services, and it's part of the program that they be involved in employment, because as we know, in order to maintain their housing, they're obviously going to have the income to be able to do that when the subsidy is gone. So that's a huge piece of our program, is that focus on either getting employment or increasing their income from employment. The case management really focuses on landlord-tenant relations, money management, community referrals, and really supports, obviously, the housing piece of it. Housing search, there we have a housing specialist, and so the housing specialist really works on identifying and securing housing in coordination with the family and where they want to be housed and what types of housing we can provide for them. Next slide. So for us, the beginning part of the program is when a family is referred to the program, we set up a focus team meeting. And the focus team meeting includes the family, the employment counselors, and the case managers. And I think it's a really good way of really establishing what everybody does. Everybody can hear all the strengths and what everybody can provide in one setting, rather than everybody having individual meetings and then coming together. It also establishes kind of the important and sense of urgency of getting housing and moving forward, and that this is really, it's a short-term program, so let's get started right now and let's really hear what's going on so that we can move forward quickly. The family has the opportunity to talk about their strengths, what their needs are, what they want out of the program, and really is heard by the service providers so that we have a context for doing this. And the employment counselors obviously can talk about what resources that there are in the employment center and what the expectation of the participants is in their involvement. And they are expected to be involved in the employment center in order to get employment, in order to sustain their housing. And then the case manager obviously talks about the available services, the housing search process, and how we partner with the family. And then it's really up to the family to make a decision as to whether they want to participate in the program or not. And I think it's really important that they understand what it means to participate, that it really is about what is it that they're willing to give to the process and what we can give back to them, and then they can make a decision if that's something that they really feel like they're capable of doing or they want to be involved in. Next slide. So once a family has decided they want to be in the program and they're enrolled in the program, it's kind of like the first order of business is, if they're homeless, if they're on the street, let's get them into some type of a shelter, motel, someplace where they can get off the street, because as long as they're on the street or living in their cars, it's really difficult to focus on what, getting a job or doing all of those other kinds of things if they're really just focusing on surviving from day to day. So in that particular situation, when they're in the pre-housing piece, the case manager is working really, really closely with the housing specialist, and they'll try to set up weekly meetings with the housing specialist, the case manager, and the family, where they can look at what does this specific family need. We have to look at the family size, so we know what type of unit we need, what is the household income, how is that going to work, and what are the barriers. We want to get up front. Tell us what your barriers are. Do you have low credit? Do you have some evictions? Are there criminal charges against you? If we can get that type of information up front, then when we go out and talk to landlords, we can tailor the the landlord to the particular client. If we can find a landlord that's not going to do a credit check if they have poor credit, or somebody that doesn't do a background check, or if they do, if we know some of the circumstances, then we can talk to the landlord about this specific person. It's not just, here's this tenant coming in and they have a criminal background. It's like, this is Susie, this is what the criminal background says, this is what she's doing to ameliorate that. So we can really sell the client in a better way. It's really difficult if we don't get that information and then it comes up later when they do a background check and then it pops up. It's really hard then to negotiate with the landlord. So the more we can get up front about barriers and really let the family know we need to know this information, not to exclude them, but really to be able to advocate for them, and it's important to have that. The other piece that we do is there's education about how to do housing search, and we partner with the family and encourage them to look for places that they want to live and to work with us, and if they find housing, then we'll step in and help them with the negotiating with the landlord and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's education around landlord-tenant relations. So if we find a unit and the tenant is going to go out there to look at it, we really want to prep them for what that looks like and how they can present themselves in the best possible way. The other piece during this period is supporting the employment goals. So they're going to be expected to be going to the job club in supervised job search, and so we want to support them in doing that and help them to understand how important that is in terms of finding their housing. Because if they if they're making minimum wage and they have 5 members in the family, it's going to be really difficult to find landlords, obviously, that we're going to be able to get housing for them. So it's important to support those employment goals too. Next slide. After after we find a place and they move in, at the move-in time, we want the case manager to be there when the tenant moves in, so they meet with the landlord and they will provide their contact information and they'll be available to help resolve any kinds of issues. And this is, helps the tenant to feel comfortable and also the landlord to feel comfortable that there is this kind of mediation service there to help them to learn to negotiate with each other if there are any kind of issues. And then in developing the case plan at that point, it's really all around what goals to be able to assume the full rent when the subsidy is over. So the budgeting emphasizes prioritizing where your money goes, and rent comes first, and then how do you spend the rest of your money. So it's really all around supporting this housing piece, because that really is where it has to start in terms of them becoming self-sufficient. So we work a lot on landlord-tenant relationships, because we want them to be able to stay in this particular place, or if they choose to leave, to be able to work with landlords and understand what everybody's rights and responsibilities are. Next. So just a few of the key components. Again, I can't reiterate enough, it is a housing program, and so case management is totally focused on the elements of locating, securing, and maintaining housing, and there's part of that is doing outside referrals if there's other needs that the family, may have longer-term goals or longer-term issues that they want to deal with. Then let's connect them up with resources out in the community that they can do that with, but it's probably not going to be part of our case plan. The case management, kind of like Juan talked about, it is mobile. We'll meet the family at the office, at the family's home, at their place of work. Obviously, if we're encouraging them to get a job and be responsible and take on all this responsibility, we don't want to sabotage that by having them, you have to come into the office between these hours. It's obviously not going to work, and it's going to sabotage their efforts to move ahead. So it's really important to be flexible with what their schedule is, and then we'll respond to that. The other piece is, along with that, is it's totally about partnering with the family. It's client-centered. The family needs to develop the goals that they think are important to them, and then our responsibility is to help them to figure out how they can accomplish those goals. So it's a very collaborative process. It's collaborative with the family, it's collaborative with our other partners, and the goal is that the family takes ownership of this plan because that's the best possible way to make it work. So, next slide. So that's it, and now I think Jen is going to take some questions.
Thanks, Lynn. So we do have a few minutes for questions. We've had a few come in during the presentations, and please feel free to continue to send in anything you'd like to ask the presenters. Two questions have come up about what, Juan or Lynn, you can address this, I hope, what you would recommend as a rapid rehousing case management caseload that's manageable for staff.
Well, for our program, and our staff does both, we keep it somewhere between 20 and 30. So right around 25, I think, for us is ideal. And with my staff, they're doing the case management as well as the housing search and placement. And we don't get our referrals all at once. So, you know, they're spread out throughout the year. So people are in varying stages of the program.
I agree, and I think for our program, so for instance, over the year we're expected to house 80 families. And we have, for that caseload, which is spread out over the year, we have one case manager and one housing specialist for that population.
Great, thank you. So this question, I think, Juan, you talked a bit about this during your presentation, but could you describe some specific strategies or examples of how you've handled participants who aren't really engaged in the program and motivational?
I think it's important that that we're constantly being encouraging. Keep in mind, clients come from different walks of life. There's different things that led them to where they're at when they enter our program. Typically, they're homeless at that point, but they could have had any number of challenges that led them to that. Quite often, they've been through other programs. They've called a million different social services agencies. Some have responded, a lot have not. They've looked for places on their own. So sometimes they could feel a little beat up by the system and that sort of thing. So, you know, ideally, in one of our reasons for being a housing first agency is so that once we get them into housing, then we start chipping away at some of those goals. Well, that's the idea. Sometimes it takes some people a little longer than others to kind of catch their breath, get their feet under them, and say, okay, now I can start taking on some of those challenges. Sometimes we see where they finally get into housing and they do want to, you know, not completely stop fighting, but they want to finally literally catch their breath and not want to engage necessarily, or not want to work right away, or, you know, just mentally it does something to some families where they're not, you know, as engaged in the goals right away. They're happy to be housed, they're happy to be in the program, they set some goals for the program, but quite often are not initially engaged. One of the things we do is try not to continually tell them, work with them on the same thing. You've got to come at them from different angles. For instance, if they're not, you see that they're not getting a job and one of their goals was to increase their income, as it should be for almost all rapid rehousing programs, you know, other than just, did you get a job, you can provide them with referrals for you know, for follow-up. You could work with them on the resume, shift the focus a little bit, do sample applications with them, provide a log, a housing search log, and talk with them about follow-up. There's a lot of different aspects to that we take for granted when we tell them, you know, that they need to do job search. That means different things to different people. So you may think they're not engaged, but in reality they're like, well, I looked online and didn't see anything, and I keep looking until I find the place. They haven't called any place. That's your expectation, but their expectation was that they were looking or keeping an eye out when they're driving around the neighborhood or something. So just to come at it from different angles, I think would be one of the key things to try to engage them.
Great. Lynn, did you want to add anything to that, or can we move on to the next question?
Why don't you go on to the next question? We don't have that much time.
Okay, great. Could you, either of you, tell us a bit about how you establish when case management and financial assistance should end for participants?
Well, we have financial assistance. We have a set program. So there's a certain number of months that we will provide the subsidy, and then it's really based on at that point working with them on their budget, on their income. Are they able to sustain that, or do we need to maybe add a couple of months until they can get to that point, as long as there's a plan to make that go forward. But we do try to stick to what the guidelines are, of what our program guidelines are, and really work with them on how they can be ready at that point. And it generally has to do with whether they have the income to sustain the rent at that point.
Great. Juan, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree. Just, to piggyback on some of what she said with regards to the timing, we do have a regular subsidy structure schedule and a typical length of the program, but it has to be tailored to the family and their progress on their goals and their trajectory. And those goals should be reviewed, modified, along their time in the program based on how they're doing and like I said, the key component being effort and communication. We have a standard amount, but it should be flexible for the family. Ours is 12 months.
Thank you. This is a question about safety for Juan. Do you have any suggestions for case managers' dress codes?
Yeah, I mean, we have an agency standard for field work, and it includes, no open-toed shoes, and your heels shouldn't be too high. For males, long pants, that sort of thing. But I mean, semi-professional attire, I would think is important. We have varying philosophies on whether or not you should wear your name tag or name badge when going into a home. For one, you don't want to let all the neighbors necessarily know that that family is getting services from a social service agency to let them keep with their privacy. But at the same time, it does let you know as you walk up with a clipboard and a name badge. Quite often, people will leave you alone because you look like you're there for some official type of business. So dress code for home visits, I think, should be the same as in the office. I don't think it should be necessarily more casual. You want to project a professional environment, and as you're going to a home visit, you want to let them know that you're there to conduct business. But I think it should coincide with your agency's policy.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Once a family is placed into permanent housing, what types of furniture or other household items do you provide through your programs? And Lynn, if you wanted to address that one.
Sure. We can provide kind of minimal stuff. We have certificates that we can give out for Savers, which is a place that has furniture and things like that. And we will supply beds, and sometimes we can do tables, pretty minimal furnishings. And like I said, through the Savers certificates and through Safeway certificates, we can help them kind of set up minimal household items.
Great, thanks. Juan, did you want to add anything to that?
Our program's very similar, minimal items, some furniture. We also provide some assistance with, electricity bill, electricity deposit. We provide deposits for our program. General household, items, dishes, and some things like that. Sometimes food boxes and things as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I just want to thank Cynthia, Juan, and Lynn again for their great presentations. We've listed a few resources here that may be of interest to participants, including the performance benchmarks and program standards that Cynthia mentioned at the beginning. We have a Rapid Rehousing Know-How series that has resources for new rapid rehousing providers, and of course the core components of rapid rehousing, which is an important document for anyone who's just beginning their programs. And with that, I think we will conclude the webinar. Again, we will be posting this, and we will be emailing slides out to everyone who's participating. So thank you very much to everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.